endurance cap. He's being pushed alongside in about a minute.
All right, those fast boats have gotten the go to move toward the vehicle.
Yeah, so we're now excitedly awaiting the recovery of our Dragon spacecraft with NASA astronauts Raja, Tom, Kayla, and Matthias inside. Dragon has already autonomously completed several steps to safe itself following splashdown. As you can see there, it is patiently waiting in the water for that recovery team. Now, for those of you just joining us, the mission has gone really smoothly so far. Dragon successfully splashed down in the Gulf of Mexico off the coast of Tampa just a little bit ago. And as you just heard, we got the okay from the teams to begin the approach.
Yes, that splashdown coming at 9:43 p.m. Pacific. But approximately 23 and a half hours ago, Dragon autonomously undocked from the space station. And a good look there, those fast boats.
Dragon SpaceX, request permission to come on board via display camera view only.
Yep, you guys are welcome on board.
Copy that, and work.
Now the crew right now are still in their seats. This is similar to when you arrive on an airplane. You have landed on the tarmac, but you're not at the gate yet. You don't want to take off those seatbelts just yet. So they are allowing the teams here in Hawthorne to take a look inside the vehicle as these fast boats approach. But just a look back at yesterday, we saw them undock from the space station and complete a series of departure burns. They jettisoned the trunk.
SpaceX Endurance, we've got a tally on recovery lights. And only one complaint is these water bottles are super heavy.
Copy that, Raja. We'll work on it.
Raj, of course, making a gravity joke there.
Yeah, for the first time in 6 months, everything has a little more weight to it now that they're back in 1G on Earth. But today we saw them jettison that trunk section and perform the final burn, that deorbit burn, very shortly ago to place them on the trajectory we had them toward the Gulf of Mexico. They successfully re-entered the Earth's atmosphere, made it through that entry interface, which we had that loss of comm as we expected, and then regained shortly after. And then the deployment of the parachutes, which slowed the spacecraft down to a gentle splashdown. We had amazing views of that tonight. And so we're now following the final part of Raja, Tom, Kayla, and Matthias' journey as Dragon is lifted out of the water and placed on the recovery boat. Not there quite yet, but sooner than later.
Yeah. As I said before, upon detection of landing, Dragon automatically releases the main parachutes to prevent wind from pulling on the spacecraft. Dragon then autonomously safes any pyrotechnics that are still present on the vehicle and may automatically perform additional minor system reconfigurations. As Leah mentioned, the astronauts remain seated in their seats and they keep their suits on, but the onboard air conditioning keeps the temperatures in check inside the spacecraft, nice and cool, and the communication systems on board remain powered so the crew can continue to communicate and make funny jokes.
And of course, this is a view inside the capsule. So you can see Raja there on the left has taken off his gloves, still has his suits on, and has been able to raise his visor. This is their first time back on Earth in 6 months, and they're just still monitoring the area around them. We heard them say that they had sights on one of those fast boats. SpaceX has 2 fast boats in the recovery fleet, and they've moved quickly to the splashdown point. They are being followed tonight by Shannon, the main recovery vessel named after Shannon Walker, NASA astronaut. And that will move into the position upwind of the spacecraft. So here's a good picture of those 2 fast boats. They both have very specific roles. The first approach is focused on immediate safety inspection of the capsule integrity and checking for any presence of those hypergolic propellant vapors, making sure it's safe for Shannon, the recovery boat, to approach the Dragon spacecraft. So once the capsule is cleared for full approach, the team begins rigging the capsule for water recovery by the recovery ship. Meanwhile, the second fast boat, which you can see in the background, is responsible for parachute recovery, and it also serves as a redundant boat to the first. We love having a backup for everything. And we'll also see a team member on a jet ski helping to gather up the now detached parachutes.
As we said, the recovery vessel Shannon, it's making its way. It's not as fast as the fast boats. But what the folks are doing there on the fast boat, whenever they do the initial approach, they actually perform tests to make sure that the hypergolic propellants, the vapors from those propellants, are not present. So the monomethyl hydrazine and the nitrogen tetroxide, MMH and NTO, are toxic if you breathe them in. And so the crew, the first thing they do when they arrive, they are wearing safety gear so that they are not breathing anything, and they have a device that is performing checks to see if any of those hypergolic vapors are present. When they get the all clear, then they're able to further, the recovery process. I promise you, the amount of training that individual goes through is quite extensive. Oh wow, that's a great view. Not thermal this time. Beautiful colors there with the various lights that we have going on. You have a better view. The individual that is actually on Dragon capsule now, that's the person I was just talking about, that will be attaching Dragon's hoist rings and connect the lifting lines. So it'll take us less than an hour to raise Dragon to the recovery boat and remove the crew from the spacecraft. As Leah mentioned before, there's very standard medical checkouts. The crew will return to land within 4 hours by helicopter. If no additional medical assistance is needed, the crew will board a waiting NASA plane and depart for Houston. Now for Matthias, the European Space Agency has a plane that will take him to Europe.
And again, medical personnel will check in with the crew. That'll be the first friendly face they see in real life, besides their other fellow astronauts for the first time in 6 months. They'll do a quick check to make sure everyone's feeling okay, and then each crew member will be helped out.
Glance from Shannon, our recovery vessel that is preparing. There's that view again, so we can see Dragon Endurance in the background with the fast boats. Probably my very favorite moment will be coming up momentarily. The individual that is actually there on the side of Dragon capsule, they will most likely be at the top part when this thing happens, but we'll actually see them jump off and back into the water. I personally have a fear of dark water, so there is not enough money or incentive for me to jump off of anything into a dark ocean.
But it's a little night swim.
Yeah, not in my brain. But that individual that you see there, they're currently putting all of the required harnesses and rigging onto the Dragon capsule. And then that will, of course, be attached to the lines that we see hanging from that hydraulic lift. Again, this is basically our first good view of Dragon Endurance from Shannon itself.
The astronauts were helped out of the vehicle. They moved straight into those medical personnel rooms. It's very restricted on who is able to be near them. Of course, everyone is masked. They've been in this somewhat pristine environment for about 6 months. Not a lot of exposure to bacteria, and so
or even pollens, allergies.
Right, exactly. So any sort of sickness, we want to prevent them from getting when their immune systems might be a little bit compromised after that 6 months in space.
Yeah. Now, in the past, we have seen that person who, at times, just because the capsule is so brightly lit and the wetsuit is super dark, it kind of reminds me of a spider traversing back and forth across the vehicle. And in the past, we've seen that individual climb up a little bit higher on the capsule prior to jumping off. But I just want to give a little perspective here. It's only because of the bright lights. Of course, for safety reasons, we want to have the area well lit during these operations. So the capsule looks like it is still that pristine white color. I promise you, it is not. We've definitely got a floating toasted marshmallow there in the Gulf of Mexico.
And there are multiple lines attached to the vehicle so that when it's lifted, it's not just dangling from one line. These help keep it stable and upright for it to be placed into the nest. So it looks like we're getting even closer to that moment, but it's amazing how quickly it happens.
So with that view there, we can see the color a little bit better.
And clearly the heat shield did its job, seeing that it's only slightly toasted.
Yeah, so this person's about to make their egress from the capsule momentarily. Whoop!
Tally-ho.
There we go. Allons-y.
Dragon SpaceX, brace for capsule lift.
Endurance copies.
My heart rate went up a little bit just envisioning having to do what that person just did.
Oh, sign me
in
up.
the seawater at night. Oh, man.
And here we go. Crew Dragon Endurance being lifted onto the Shannon recovery vessel.
Pretty cool view there of the heat shield now that it has been lifted out of the water. You can see the water sloshing around there. That is actually where the parachutes deploy from. The main parachutes are located in that bay there under the side hatch. The drogue parachutes are located in the bays above the side hatch.
That's a great view, as you mentioned, of the side hatch. So when they place Dragon in the nest, as they're preparing to do now, they will pull it closer to an egress platform, because this is significantly high off the ground, maybe 10 feet off the ground. So there's an egress platform that is level with the side hatch. That way it makes it easier for us to help the crew members out of the capsule. The capsule will be centered and oriented, as you can see, and then Dragon will be moved to that hangar underneath the helipad on the ship. Yes, that will prepare us to open the hatch.
There we can see Dragon Endurance.
Dragon SpaceX, welcome aboard the recovery vessel. Recovery personnel are completing the final checks. Stand by for translation to the egress platform.
First copy, standing by.
Great view there. We can see that Dragon Endeavour is now safely on our recovery vessel, Shannon.
And this is a view from the helipad itself. So the vehicle will be pulled under this platform to where, like I mentioned, it'll be level with that egress platform, or I should say the side hatch will be level with the egress platform. But again, our crew is out of the water and preparing to get out of the capsule.
Yeah.
And it looks like they are finishing hooking the nest up to those lines that'll help them pull it toward the egress platform. You know, I wish I could have gotten close enough to try and determine what that smell might be. I was hoping to when I was thinking about it while I was there, but we stayed, a safe distance away from the capsule. And of course, being in the middle of the Gulf of Mexico, there's only a little bit of salt water. So that was an overpowering smell itself.
You probably smell more fish than anything else.
Maybe so. But yes, we are getting pretty close now to seeing our astronauts exit the vehicle and taking their first breath of fresh air after 6 months in space. But again, it's interesting that your colleague mentioned it smelled like, oh, here we go, we have movement.
Super quick. It looked like the capsule was being hosed down a little bit just to get the some of that salt water out of those bays. Once again, that bay at the top there is where the drogue parachutes are stored. And then the bay at the bottom underneath the side hatch is where the main parachutes were stored. So you can see that it's a pretty compact space. The parachutes go through a very thorough and well-checked packing process before they are actually stored in those bays.
And the person in the middle helping to properly park Crew Dragon exactly where they want it to be for that hatch to line up perfectly with the egress platform.
Just like you see on a runway with airplanes.
Exactly. Or a friend when I'm not doing a good parking job.
You can see there the windows for the Dragon capsule there on either side of the side hatch. As you might notice, the teams are wearing their personal protective gear to make sure that if there are any vapors, that they aren't breathing them. They're performing those checks now to make sure that those are not present.
Dragon SpaceX, stand by for side hatch opening and egress.
And there's Stephanie standing by for side hatch opening.
All right. We can see the crew there taking off their PPE. We got the okay to open the hatch.
That means the area is cleared of those hypergalls that the fast boats were aiming to detect, as well as they got some secondary checks once on board this vehicle as well. And again, the first person that you'll see peek their head into the capsule will be the medical officer, making sure that everyone's feeling well. And the crew members will be assisted out one by one and escorted to those medical bays for those routine checks.
Right now they're just wiping down the areas around the side hatch that might still be a little wet from splashdown. Just want to make sure that when the side hatch is opened and we install the protective fittings, that everything is dry, just to eliminate any possibility that nobody slips or anything whenever they are making their way out. There we can see the side hatch is open.
Some applause from team members on board. And that's their first friendly face that they've gotten to see in person in 6 months, aside from their crewmates on the International Space Station.
The white fixture that we saw just moments ago, they're now placing into the side hatch. This is just a protective cover to make sure that whenever the crew members are egressing, that they don't bump anything around the hatch. That protects not only the Dragon capsule itself, but also them. As most of you know, we do reuse our Dragon capsules, so making sure that we avoid any damage during the ingress and egress process is important.
The journey home is not quite over for these astronauts. Even though they are back on Earth, they will be helped out of the Crew Dragon vehicle. They will have some routine medical checks done before they are loaded onto a helicopter.
Dragon SpaceX, can you confirm that the audio is improved?
SpaceX Endurance? Yes, that's much better, thanks.
Sure thing, sorry for the delay.
Sounds like that was the voice of Mission Specialist Kayla Barron. We can see that the slide has been put in place. This helps the astronauts gently make their exit from the capsule. Once again, the Crew-3 crew has splashed down after spending a total of 177 days in space, 175 of those days on the International Space Station.
And they saw quite a lot during their stay on the space station, including the arrival of 8 visiting vehicles. That includes the Axiom 1 crew just a couple of weeks ago, as well as the Crew-4 crew just last week. And the crew today consisting of European Space Agency astronaut Matthias Maurer and NASA astronauts Raja Chari, Tom Marshburn, and Kayla Barron. Chari and Barron were part of the same astronaut selection class, so they've done everything from training together all the way through their first space flight together.
That's really cool. They were the turtles, right?
They were the turtles, and we saw a turtle as their zero gravity indicator on the flight up. There are a couple more turtles on board now, with Bob Hines and Jessica Watkins, all being from the same class as well. And it looks like Raja is being helped out of his seat.
I could imagine that after spending 6 months in space, all of this must feel really weird. We heard him make a joke earlier about the water bottle feeling heavy. We can see that Commander Raja Chari has now egressed the capsule and is making his way onto the rollaway. Looked like we had some thumbs up there just momentarily.
Yes, Raja looks to be in good spirits after 6 months in space on his first space flight. And of course, this is just a precaution after spending 6 months in space, being on a ship as well. Whenever you return, it helps to have a seat and maybe be helped to those medical bays. And that's very similar, like I mentioned, to a Soyuz landing where crew members are carried to the seats and then carried to the medical tent. So this just makes it a little easier for our crew members who are just experiencing gravity for the first time in 6 months. Of course, they do work out about 2 hours a day on the space station to help maintain muscle mass and bone density. But when they are regaining this equilibrium, every little bit helps.
Absolutely. They went through a dynamic event of, re-entering the Earth's atmosphere. As we said before, they experience about 3 to 5 Gs. And then splashing down, they're bobbing in the ocean, and now they're on a ship. I can imagine that their inner ear is, it's a challenge to readjust to, the spin of the Earth.
And I believe that's Tom Marshburn, NASA astronaut, being helped out of the capsule. That means our 2 mission specialists, Matthias Maurer and Kayla Barron, are still inside, and there's Marshburn.
Also looks to be in great spirits. You might hear some background noise here behind Leah and I. We're at SpaceX headquarters in Hawthorne, California. Second shift production is well underway.
The work never stops.
Yeah, despite splashdown, we're still a live operations environment, so you might hear some production noise in the background. We are in a rocket factory.
And we're coming up on about an hour since splashdown. That happened at 9:43 p.m. Pacific time. We have 2 crew members now out of Crew Dragon Endurance, breathing their first breaths of air on Earth for the first time in 6 months. And you see them being loaded and being assisted to the medical bays for those routine checks. That is mission specialist Kayla Barron receiving some help as she makes her way outside.
All right, looks like Kayla Barron has made her way down Dragon's accessibility slide and is going to be making her way to the medical tents. I think I see a smile on her face.
We have one more crew member inside Crew Dragon. That's European Space Agency astronaut Matthias Maurer, one of the mission specialists. And that'll be our last crew member to exit Crew Dragon Endurance. All 4 will now be receiving those routine medical checks inside the bays on recovery vessel Shannon before being escorted to the helicopter that will take them back to land. Their first steps on dry land in 6 months.
Once the recovery vessel and the Dragon capsule get back to the port, the recovery team will perform additional inspections on the capsule before loading Dragon onto a flatbed truck at the SpaceX facility in Cape Canaveral for post-processing.
We definitely saw big thumbs up from Matthias Maurer on coming back from his first space flight. And now that Raja, Tom, Kayla, and Matthias are safely back home on Earth and getting checked out by the NASA medical team, we're going to wrap up our live coverage of their historic return. I do want to mention that the media telecon is now being moved up to start at approximately 2 a.m. Eastern time, so make sure to tune into that.